My name is Sue Leitner. I'm a large R judge with the USHJA. For many, many years, I had a farm with breeding young horses and showing and starting young horses. I was also, from 2009 to 2016, best handler at the USHJA Sally B. Wheeler West Coast. And I'm here today to talk to you about turnout for handling a horse in the ring in hand, turnout for the horse, and turnout for the handler. Here we have 4 horses ready for the model. Each of them looks a little bit different, and we'll talk about that appearance. Here we have our first horse, beautifully groomed, beautifully turned out, absolutely immaculate braid job, both mane and tail. Note how their braids are numerous and very even. It just gives such a nice look to the horse's neck. His feet are beautifully polished. He's standing nicely. Now let's go to our second horse. Also a very nice chestnut, also groomed very beautifully. Notice though on this horse the lack of hoof polish, so his feet just don't look quite as finished. And notice his braids. He has what we call jumper braids. Jumper braids tend to not make the horse's top line look quite as long. They don't look nearly as neat as our first horses. Let's go to our third horse. Also very nicely groomed. This one also is lacking hoof polish. And notice his braids. His braids are pretty uneven. It was a nice attempt, but his braids are pretty uneven compared to the first horse. Our fourth horse is very lovely, nicely turned out. Feet are polished. She's very well trimmed, but she's not braided. Now, that's certainly not going to affect her conformation, but it certainly doesn't look like the effort in her appearance has been tended to as well as our first horses, and particularly as well as our first horse in the lineup with the beautiful braid job. So it's just something to think about when you're preparing to show a horse in hand. All of the details of turnout can be quite important. Another part of grooming that comes up in terms of discussing braiding versus not braiding, if you notice, the horse with the braided tail has a lot more definition to his hind quarter, while the horse on the left without the braid may have a beautifully muscled hind end. It's very difficult to tell with all the hair. For a judge, this horse on the right, who has the braids in, it's really easy to see the outline of his hip, the width of his gaskin, where his hocks lay. It's very easy. So that's another reason why braiding the tail is an advantage. Another aspect of the tail on a horse, our horse that previously we noted was so beautifully turned out, we just took his false tail away, and look at how little tail he has. When a horse has a very, very wispy tail like this one, it can help the way that they look when one enhances it with a false tail. We can see the difference because we've seen this horse with and without a tail. Let's look at the second horse. You see the difference in the full tail. Now, ironically, the second horse doesn't have a false tail. That's his tail. But if nature did not bless your horse with a nice tail, sometimes it just helps the illusion of their balance when we add a tail. One comment like to make about that, and that's with regards to the hunter breeding. I'm really not a fan of using false tails on yearlings, and often not on 2-year-olds, because I think yearlings particularly are only at 3/4 of their growth, and the tail itself goes along with that. I've always found it awkward looking to my eye to try to put a heavy tail on a baby horse. Saying that, occasionally you'll get a horse that grows up so fast that he's a very, very tall guy with a little wispy tail, in which case augmenting the tail on the breeding horse is helpful. But in general, I tend to like things that are flattering and yet look natural. All right, now let's talk about trimming and clipping. Because we're at the winter stage of the year, virtually all of these horses, in fact, have a body clip. And when you're in the position to need to do a body clip, you want it to be fresh and smooth and beautiful, like our first horse here. Our horse, along with having a beautiful body clip, he is immaculately trimmed. His ears are clean, they don't have any hair poking out of them. His muzzle is beautifully trimmed. Under his jaw, we don't see any loose hanging hairs. His legs, if we look, are also beautifully trimmed. And I'll show you in a minute the difference that you can make in definition with a good trim of the legs and feet versus not. Here's our horse that also has a very nicely done body clip. His trim is quite lovely, but if you zoom in, you'll notice that he has very long nose hair. In today's world, we don't necessarily penalize for long nose hair, and because in lots of places in the world now, trimming the nose is frowned upon or even forbidden. So as a judge, it's not really something that should come into play. I think it becomes a matter of personal choice and or the legislation in your area. Do note the top, and I just point this out, the little hair sticking up, he has sticking up in front of his braids. I just noticed that. It's not awful. It's just interesting to see how different it makes the top of his neck look compared to the horse that doesn't have the mohawk. Now I'm sure in this situation, this horse, his owner is trying to let the rest of his mane grow out. So I just take that into account. But in an ideal world, I'd try not to have that. Now our next horse, it's interesting because he's got a trim nose, a nicely trimmed jawline, but his ears are fluffy. You can see the hair kind of sticking out of his ears. Again, it's not something that's terrible, it's just not nearly as clean a look as when we trim the ears. Here's another interesting thing about this horse. Let's look at his feet and legs. If you look carefully, you can see that on his right hind and his right fore, both have been trimmed. There's very good definition of the coronary band, very good definition of the fetlock. Now let's look at the left side. On the same horse, the left side, the coronary band is not trimmed, the fetlock's not trimmed. You can really see it if you look on the hind. And again, there's not really anything wrong with this, but it does not lend itself to as nice a definition of the horse's legs. You're always trying to present your horse in a way that it's very easy for the judge to see his outline and be able to look at all of his positive attributes. So this is where trimming the legs really, really helps. While we're here with Miles, let's take a quick look at his feet. I want you to just notice the improper application of the hoof oil so that he has stripes on his feet. The lower part is darker than the upper part. If you use hoof oil, it's really important that you make it very smooth and very neat, because otherwise, rather than adding to the horse's appearance, it's going to subtract. Now, we've talked a little bit about appearance of the horses for the in-hand classes. Let's talk about our handlers. As we pan this group, look at the variety of different outfits we have. So let's talk about what's appropriate. Our girl at the end of the line has on breeches, which is certainly appropriate if you're riding. However, it should be a complete outfit. She needs boots, she needs a hat, she needs a proper shirt, she needs a proper jacket, and let's zone in on those tennis shoes for a moment. Those little bitty tennis shoes that if she's showing a yearling or a 2-year-old or even a grown horse, what happens when that horse makes a misstep on those soft tennis shoes? Let's look at our next handler. She is pretty typically dressed for the hunter breeding. Her khaki slacks, her blazer, her paddock boots, all of that is considered quite appropriate for our handlers. And mind you, that's whether you're showing in the amateur handlers or the open or the model. This is a pretty typical non-riding outfit. Let's look at our handler that comes up next. She has on a very nice pair of slacks, a very nice blouse, a very good pair of shiny paddock boots. Now, though I would not wear this particular outfit if I were showing in a championship or showing at a major premier horse show, say Devon or Upperville, one of those horse shows, the Sally B. Wheeler Championships. But on an average day, particularly on a sunny, warm day, the way that this young lady is dressed is quite appropriate for a woman to wear handling a horse on the ground. It's very neat. She's got the proper footwear on. She just doesn't have the addition of the blazer jacket. Let's say if we're showing in a hotter part of the country, that can get to be pretty uncomfortable. Now let's go to our next horse and our next handler. Now this was a horse that we said was actually fairly well turned out. Braids being a little uneven, mohawk, but look at his handler. His handler has jeans on, which in my estimation have no place in the model or the hunter breeding ring. To me, it's just not feeling like dressing up for the horse or the judge is appropriate. Could you turn to the side? Note her footwear. There are a couple things wrong with her footwear. The heels are going to make it very difficult to try to run in, and her open-toed shoes make me concerned that she could certainly get stepped on or stub that toe. I noticed too, while it's very appropriate always for a handler on the ground to carry a stick, look at her fabulous pink stick. That wouldn't be my first choice if I were showing a horse in hand. Conservative again, conservative. Now let's go to our next horse. Here we have Sarah, and she is turned out beautifully in an outfit that she probably is going to wear to show her hunter later in the day, or maybe already has shown her hunter. When you're showing a horse in hand, it's absolutely appropriate to wear the kind of an outfit that you're going to wear when you show a hunter. In a pinch, you could probably get away with wearing whites if you had a big class that day, but truly the classic tan breeches, conservative color coat, nicely polished boots are absolutely acceptable. And leading our pack, along with the most beautifully turned out horse, we have Mike, who is dressed in the classic khakis and blazer with his tie. For most gentlemen, this is considered the classic outfit when you show a horse in hand, whether it be model or hunter breeding. Some variations on this are fine. I've seen people in dark slacks with a very nice sport coat, but this, like I say, is the classic outfit for a man to wear when he shows a horse in hand. Another question that has come up in terms of showing the horse in the model situation are sunglasses. Somebody asked me, are sunglasses appropriate? Well, if the sun's out, absolutely they are. Mike has chosen not to wear them, as has Sarah. Lise has glasses on. Danielle does not. Melissa has sunglasses. Muriel does not. But sunglasses are really not an issue. A comment about footwear with regards to our handlers. Paddock boots are always right because they offer your foot the most protection. But a nice pair of loafers, such as Mike is wearing, are appropriate and sometimes a little bit easier for the men to run in. Another part of a good handler's outfit is the stick. Traditionally, we always carry a riding crop, not a long one, but a nice tidy hunter stick when we show a horse in hand. We can use it to point at his nose. There, and suddenly look at the attention she got from that horse. So it's a great tool to help the handler aside from being traditional. It's not inappropriate if you have to move it up and down to get their attention while the judge is viewing the horse. You're trying to give your horse that beautiful stretched out picture of the hunter. Of course, another element of the presentation of a horse is the bridle itself. Both the fit and the style. It's pretty typical in the hunter breeding to see a very plain, very pretty bridle. A little raise, such as this horse has on his nose band and his brow band, is fine. More elaborate is not so good. But it's very pretty bridle, well fitted, well cleaned, well oiled. The use of the D snaffle is very popular nowadays. It's very attractive. And it's fit on this horse just right. It's slightly wrinkling the corners of his mouth. Looks like a very comfortable fit. This is pretty much an ideal that you'd like for the look when you're trying to show your horse off. Here we have another bridle, and it's actually a very good quality bridle. Notice that the bit is a little different. And this is the second type of bit that we typically like to use in the model or the hunter breeding. And this is the full cheek driving snaffle. One thing I will mention about this horse and this fit though, is look at how low the noseband is on this horse's nose. It suddenly makes a horse that has a very adorable head look like he's got a bit of a long one. Keep taking it. Now watch what happens to the look visually when I take this noseband up. Now notice that no longer does it give him that look that his nose is too long. Now we've just effectively accented that beautiful head. One other thing to make note of, and this is something that happens, I see horses come out of the barn often. Look at where this horse's throat latch is. It's certainly unattractive. It's also not very functional where it is. It should be fitted here. Now we still have room for flexion if we needed it on a riding horse, but we've suddenly once again, made a better accent on the horse's head. It also will function better as a throat latch, which is supposed to prevent the bridle from coming over the head. Here we have another actually beautifully fitted bridle, quite attractive. But one glaring thing stands out to me, and that is, look at the plastic on the bit. For the purpose of model, because as this is quite different from riding, plain metal bit is always more attractive because it does not distract your attention from the horse's head. First place my eye goes when I look at this horse is that big plastic thing on the side of his bit. So I would highly recommend, and it really doesn't matter if it's a baby, a young yearling, they still, for the purposes of handling and showing, they don't need or should not wear a plastic bit. It just detracts from the horse. Notice also that instead of reins, this horse has a lead shank. It's actually called a Newmarket, so that the chain's hooked to either side of the bit. For the young hunter breeding horses, the Newmarket is completely acceptable to show with. Sometimes in the early part of the yearling year, showing the yearling actually with the Newmarket can be safer if they tend to get flighty or worried, because it lessens the possibility that they will get a foreleg through the rein. Here's another very classic bridle, and that is the smooth leather bridle. It's beautifully fitted on this horse. The cavesson noseband is in the proper place. The throat latch is nice. This is more along the lines of a very traditional old hunt bridle, but it's absolutely acceptable. They don't have to be raised. You just like the quality look of the tack. And once again, it doesn't take away from the horse's head. It's very subtle, letting her true personality and look come out. Here's yet another type of bridle that we see today, and it's one that really is not appropriate to use in a model class or in the hunter breeding. The crown piece, which has that swoop in it, all of the buckles, and this bridle has buckles for everything on every side. The noseband, which is giant and padded. The problem is, what happens for me is I just feel like he's got stuff all over his face. I can't really appreciate his face like I could appreciate the last horse, because my eye is constantly drawn to multiple buckles and lots of padding. The other thing, he has a loose ring snaffle on, which there's not a rule against it, but it's just, I think, not nearly as flattering as the D snaffle or the full cheek driving snaffle. Another piece to mention when we are, in fact, using a driving snaffle or a full cheek snaffle versus a D snaffle, and that is the keepers on the bit. It's very important that we have the keepers. Now, when you look at this horse, you're seeing a full cheek driving snaffle that has no keepers. So it just looks a little unkempt and improper. Another thing to note about this bridle is so low on his nose that it just makes him look like he has an excessively long head. And note the brow band, all the bling on the brow band. Well, that might be fun to have in the jumper ring or even on your bridle at home. It really doesn't have a place in the model or the hunter breeding ring, because once again, it just detracts from the natural beauty of the horse. Now we have that same nice gray horse who's had a change of bridle, so we have no more bling, but now look, this bridle's too small. It doesn't fit him properly. It's up too high and his cheekbones barely goes around his nose. He's got a little teeny tiny D snaffle that would be appropriate for on a yearling, but definitely not on a horse of this size. And that's something I should mention. When one is showing a yearling, you have to really be aware that they have a smaller mouth and typically need to wear a bit that you might use on a nice medium or large pony. Once again, we have our same gray horse who's worn everything from bling to a bridle that's too small. And I hope when you see him now in this beautifully fitted bridle, a wider noseband, which helps him it fits his rather large face. One other thing that's probably worth mentioning when it comes to the bridle fit, and that is everybody's had the experience when you've had those irritatingly loose keepers that don't seem to want to stay in place. Well, it would be nice to take it to the saddler and have it repaired, but in a pinch, something that you can do to help keep your keeper up is to put a little braiding rubber band, the same color as your bridle, underneath your keeper. And your keeper will stay stuck to the rubber band and it won't slip off for the duration of your class.